Okay, gents, let's focus now on week 5 of the season. Tottenham versus Chelsea headlines the action in the Premier League, a massive London derby. I'll be in North London for that. Cannot wait to be on site. And for what should be a raucous atmosphere, let's put it that, Tottenham and Chelsea fans do not get along. And it's going to be really exciting to see if this is the battle of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium after the Battle of the Bridge a few years ago. I'm sure it will be. So let's preview that game and start there. Only place we can really start. Andy Edwards, Tottenham against Chelsea. What are you looking forward to in this game? Because Tottenham have got a few defensive issues, obviously lost last time out against Palace. Do you expect this to be a game they can thrive in and actually like the role of the underdog like they did against Man City? It might actually suit them quite well.
I think in that sense, yes, it does. And Nuno has proven already that he can set a team up to play one of the bigger teams and that he can get results. He can even get a win against Manchester City to open the season. So he is capable of doing that. It's just about, for me, is will we see a little bit of more of imagination from Nuno? To me, the Crystal Palace game was the game for that. You're coming out of the international break. You've got 3 wins in the bag already, and you have set the foundation for what this team is going to be. It's clearly going to be a team that defends first and foremost. I didn't think it was going to be, and I hesitate to use the word negative because I understand the issues that surrounded player availability due to the international travel and COVID restrictions and everything that went into that specific game against Palace. But that was the game that we needed to see not a 5-man back line, where we needed to see not 3 defensive midfielders played together, and that's exactly what he did. So it was a little bit disheartening. It was a little bit dispiriting to see that kind of persist a little bit when I felt like this early in the season should be about defending that, building that defensive foundation, and then building on top of it with the attack and getting out onto the counter just a little bit more. And Harry Kane was completely uninvolved in that game against Crystal Palace. Without Son on the field, he had nobody that was operating on the same wavelength as him. So it was real. I think it's a write-off performance from Spurs in that one. You hope it is, at least. And they come out this weekend and they show a little bit more fight. They just look a little bit more cohesive against Chelsea, a little bit better in possession. They have some ideas. I think at 4 games into a manager's tenure, that's still what you're looking for. You're not desperate and focusing on just the results. It's about still building this team for Spurs and what they're going to look like as we get on in the season. So I just want to see them try to hold their own just a bit more in this game and be a little bit more adventurous and believe in themselves. Believe that you can play with one of the top teams in the Premier League.
I think it does set up quite well for them because Chelsea, that they will have a lot of the ball, but they don't necessarily like to do that. They can control the tempo of the game, but I think Chelsea are better as a counter-attacking and a kind of catching teams on the break as well, the way they're set up. So it's going to be a really interesting game of cat and mouse to see who comes out and kind of takes the game to one another. And I think Tottenham, especially against Man City, if we look at that, we're really good on the counter with Bergwijn, Lucas Moura, Dele Alli, all supporting Son. Obviously, Son may not play with his injury status, so that's a big loss for Tottenham. And that could really swing the game in Chelsea's favour. Speaking of Chelsea, Nick Mendola, first few games of the season, 3 shutouts in their first 4 Premier League games. That great defensive performance away at Liverpool. Lukaku scoring goals. Is there any real weakness in this Chelsea side under Thomas Tuchel?
No, and they haven't even got Saul learning his trade yet. Obviously, had a rough first half, but no one thinks he's I don't think no one. Very few people think he's a poor player. So it's going to come around for them. I just look at the underlying numbers around them. And even when they're not great, and the only time you could say they were not great this year is the game they won 3-0 over Aston Villa. I mean, that's something. I mean, you might say that about the Zenit game as well, but I mean in the Premier League play. I like them, and I like this more as not to shift too heavy of a burden to Spurs, Andy, but I like this more as a test of what they can be than I do anything about Chelsea. If Chelsea loses this game, especially having beaten Man City in a game that maybe not beat Man City after Tottenham had beaten Man City, maybe it tells us something more about Tottenham than it would about Chelsea. Because I look at that game, Man City had more chances against Spurs, right? Yeah. At the beginning of the year. Yeah. And I look at the other results. I think Palace is probably better than we thought they were going to be as they bring their pieces together. But the Wolves game wasn't decisive. And the Watford game wasn't decisive. So I think this will tell us a lot about Spurs, and maybe Chelsea can play a little free.
Yeah, I'll say this for Nuno. This will be the first game that he'll be truly judged in his tenure on the way he sets the team up, the way that his team plays, partially because of who they're playing, being one of the local rivals in Chelsea, but also the point of the season now. Man City was obviously too early, first game of the season. The last few games, again, about building the foundation. This is going to be the first game where if he doesn't get the lineup right, if he doesn't get the tactics right, if he doesn't get the subs right in game and affect the game and pull it towards Tottenham's favor, he's going to be judged for that. And so this is where I think the criticisms, but the critiques, the constructive critiques can begin with Nuno, and we can start to really piece together what some of his ideas are and just what his beliefs are, I think, about building a team as well. I think we'll learn a lot about Spurs and who Nuno wants them to be in this game.
It's going to be really exciting. As I said, I'll be at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, North London. Tottenham against Chelsea this weekend. Massive London derby and a massive test for Tottenham, as we said, to see where they're at and if they can break down Chelsea. And I think a draw would be a very good result for Tottenham at home. They would definitely take that right now. But with Harry Kane, if you can get him the service, then who knows against Chelsea, because I feel like Kane would still fancy his chances against Rudiger, Christensen, or Azpilicueta, if those three do line up as centre-backs. But he does need some help. That's going to be key in this one. Who can get in and around Harry Kane to help him if Heung-min Son isn't fit enough to feature? Okay, focusing on another big game coming up. Two teams who start the season pretty well. Nick Mendola, Brighton and Hove Albion against Leicester City. I know you're high on the Seagulls. 3 wins from their first 4 games. They are soaring. There you go. Perfect illustration there of how Graham Potter gives his team talks, I'm assuming, each week. They've been pretty good, huh? I mean, and against Leicester City, I feel like this matches up decent for them, although Jamie Vardy is always dangerous on the counter, as we've seen already.
He is. We've talked so often about how we like the players that Leicester have signed. And the only reason that I'm not picking Brighton to win, let alone get a result right now, is because I don't know what they're going to get from their center forward type. And it may come down to, I mean, going back to the Man City game, I think it's not just important that Harry Kane plays well. I think it's important that he plays well early. And I want Neil Maupay and Trossard and these types, I want them on the board early against Leicester, because I have questions about Leicester. If you look at what they're doing in game, they are giving up a overwhelming amount of shots in open play. And yes, part of that is playing against Man City, and they've played West Ham. But I just am curious as to what Brendan Rodgers is doing. He's earned our faith to say there's a plan here and we know what's going on and it's going to go fine. And it's not just about Fofana or an injury. But I have more questions about Leicester in terms of the expectations they will have than I do about Brighton, say, finishing mid-table. And I've already admitted that they've kind of become my kind of second favorite team, if you will. I love watching them play. I'm considering either going as Ted Lasso or Graham Potter for Halloween because of Graham Potter's sweet beard. I think he's got Samson-like qualities. But I also think Brighton balked at the report is that Brighton balked at French Eddie, Odsonne Edouard's salary demands. And that's the reason he went to their rivals at Palace. And if they have him right now, I think we're talking about, are they a team that can be around the periphery of the top 7?
Kind of say Graham Potter with his beard. He kind of looks like Chuck Norris. Does anyone else think that?
Yeah. I can see
right. I can't unsee that now that I've thought about it, but it does look great. It does look great. But Brighton had a great start to the season. Leicester, of course, just kind of plodding along. I think with the Europa League now as well, they're going to have to rotate the squad well. If they get lucky with defensive injuries, I think they'll be right up there again in and around the top 6. But worst case scenario for the Foxes, they can have a good run in Europe and finish in the top 10. And I think that's a very good season. I do not think with the signings that the other big boys have made that they can actually break into the top 4 this season. I think that's a step too far, and they probably missed their chance the last couple of seasons. They did great to have that chance, but I think they just missed out on that opportunity to get back into the Champions League. But focusing on 2 teams who are I would say got their eye on Europe, and the Aston Villa against Everton at Villa Park is going to be a big one. A great start to the season for Everton. I mean, no one really expected this under Rafael Benitez, but he needed to have a good start to get the Everton faithful on side, and he's certainly done that.
Yeah, just on the Chuck Norris, Graham Potter, Ted Lasso issue there at the end, I think if you go as any of them as Halloween, 2 of them, at least in the U.S., will be recognized a little bit more readily than maybe Graham Potter would be. So maybe take that into consideration is all I'm saying. I think I'm in on Everton. I think I'm in. For years, we have looked at Everton and said, well, we like a lot of their individual players. They've always have really good, kind of classy, usually midfielders and wide players. And they have that now, but they also have 3 defenders that I kind of trust in the Premier League, and they're playing together. And now they have an adult in charge once again, and that's one thing that I look for in clubs that I buy into is there an adult running things who has real and clear ideas? And are these ideas tested over time to be successful? And if nothing else, that is the very definition of Rafa Benitez. I love the way that this team is working right now. Now, of course, they are always 1 or 2 or 3 injuries away from being without a lot of the very key and irreplaceable players that they have. Allen being one of those, Abdoulaye Doucouré being another one. He has very, very quickly, and I think quietly, has really risen the ranks of just some of the best two-way players in the Premier League, and he doesn't get nearly enough credit for that. And then you've got Richarlison up top, who's in pretty good form. Damari Gray, who was signed for a couple million in the summer from Leicester City. He is a little bit of a post-hype sleeper. We thought we were going to see so much of him early in his career, and it took a little bit of time. Now in his early, almost mid-20s, and he's having a breakout start to the season. He's got 3 goals in 4 games, so there's just a lot to like about this Leicester team, or this Everton team, excuse me. I think Rafa has just taken a lot of players, put them into their best position, simplified things just a little bit, asked players to do what they're best at. Damari Gray and Richarlison and Andros Townsend. I've lived the Andros Townsend experience. It's not supposed to be this good, but it's been pretty good for the first couple of games. So there's good vibes around Everton right now, and that's something that you haven't been able to say really for quite a long time.
That's true. And Aston Villa as well. I feel like even though losing Jack Grealish, they've got a lot of good, exciting players there. Danny Ings scoring goals. Leon Bailey, obviously, looking to finally get him on the pitch week in, week out after a little injury picked up just before he arrived from Bayer Leverkusen. So this is going to be a fun one. I can see a lot of goals in this game, maybe a high-scoring draw, something like that. But that'll be a good one between 2 teams who are, so entrenched in the Premier League, have met so many times over the years, and should be a great atmosphere at Villa Park. Okay, final game to focus on: West Ham United against Manchester United. This is going to be intriguing to me to see, number 1, how Manchester United react to losing to young boys in the Champions League, and number 2, how do West Ham react to being in Europa League action, flying to Dynamo Zagreb, and not used to basically being in that Thursday, Sunday grind, and with a relatively small squad. And Mikel Antonio suspended. He got a late red card away at Southampton last time out, so that changes the whole dynamic of their attack. Can Jared Bowen play up top there? Can the Ben Rama and those guys take a different position out wide? How are they going to match up? I think they'd probably go slightly more defensively, West Ham, in this game, and try and hit Man United on the counter. But for Manchester United, this is big to kind of show their reaction that, yes, the defeat of Young Boys was just a blip due to the red card to Wan-Bissaka, and it's okay, we got this. But Ronaldo now coming up against West Ham, I feel like he's going to have a few opportunities there. West Ham are good going forward, but they do give up a few opportunities. So far, we've seen that against Crystal Palace and Leicester and even Southampton, that they somehow got a shutout, but some last-ditch defending back there. So this is an intriguing game, and another one which I think could be a high-scoring draw. And I just think, it could go either way, right, in terms of who's going to go and get the win this weekend. But I'm intrigued to see how both these teams react to European midweek action. Some other games to keep an eye on this week: Newcastle against Leeds United, Burnley against Arsenal, and Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Palace are kind of a sleeper, right? Nick mentioned it earlier. They've done better than we thought they would do so far. They have a pretty good record against Liverpool, especially at Anfield over the years. So that's a one to keep an eye on for an upset. And when it comes to Newcastle against Leeds, Newcastle really need a positive result. I mean, already the pressure's building on Steve Bruce. I had the chance to speak with Patrick Bamford, the Leeds United striker, earlier on this week, and he told me that they're very, very calm. The vibe is good, even though they have yet to pick up a win in the season. But they have played against Liverpool and Manchester United early, had some tough games. But I just feel like, Nick Mendola, can you give us some more information on Newcastle Leeds? Because it seems like Leeds will be fancying their chances of piling the pressure on Steve Bruce in this one.
Yeah, and they bossed Newcastle last year. Absolutely crushed them the first time they played. I don't think anybody's favoring Bruce to outfox Bielsa, even with Graham Jones behind him. I think if Leeds lose this game, then there are going to be so many questions, so many questions about how these players are adapting. In the championship under Bielsa, wasn't the talk always that they got to the playoffs and were out of gas? There was even some talk, maybe I'm making this up, about that last year. Newcastle, I think, is just in a position where you don't know what you're going to get from them. I refuse to predict whether they're going to win in any game. If they're playing Man City or Watford, I refuse to believe that anything will happen, good or positive. They are absolutely infuriating. And if I could Back to the Future myself and Gray's Almanac myself, I would give them the story of what it would be like to follow Newcastle for 20 years. And clearly I would have a casino empire.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, but for Leeds, it's interesting, right? Because it's almost like have teams figured them out. Is it that sophomore slump situation? Patrick Bamford he kind of mentioned that. He said, maybe, we've got to do things slightly differently, but Marcelo Bielsa doesn't really roll that way. So if we were 11 robots, then we would win every game playing Marcelo Bielsa's way. But that's not the case, right? Andy, anything to say on that game or Burnley-Arsenal? Because Burnley and Arsenal both haven't started the season well, but you'd have to probably fancy Arsenal, even though Burnley will get a bit of a bump by the news, from the news that Sean Dyche has signed a new 4-year contract at Turf Moor.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about Leeds there very quickly is players will play for a coach who demands that kind of commitment and buy-in and work rate as long as it's successful. But once it's no longer successful, all the extra things that you have to do to be fully committed, to be bought in, to be one of the manager's players, it starts to become, it starts to feel like it's outside the realm of your responsibility. And you just don't quite want to go the extra little bit. And so if results turn on a coach or a manager like that, it's always worth keeping an eye on that. Well, how long are they going to stay the course and believe in those things and continue to apply themselves in those ways if the results aren't worth it on the field? At a certain point, it just becomes not worth it. And then, we've seen this with Bielsa throughout his career is it's great right up until it's not. And then very quickly, it's no longer great. It's no longer good. It's really bad.
Well, it's going to be interesting. A lot of big games coming up in the Premier League this week. Week 5. Can't wait for it, lads. At Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. We'll have previews, team news, how to watch all these games, and an analysis and reaction from all of them as well. So that does us for Pro Soccer Talk this week. A lot of fun catching up, guys. Busy week with the Champions League and Premier League action just rolling on through. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll speak to you all very soon indeed.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series, and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches, and much more.